I was just listening to Bob Proctor this morning. He was saying that, as a kid, he was kind of like a loser, like dropped out of school, like, just dead end jobs, like not making much of himself. And then he met this guy who was super successful and taught him to read the book Think and Grow Rich and do all these things. And Bob Proctor died like a billionaire, so it worked. But meeting this guy who was successful, but started off as like a loser too, right? Like not really. And he was like, wait, so that means that I don't have to stay a loser my whole life. And I think what you're doing is so important because we all need those people that are similar to us and be like, wait a second, but they're doing the thing that I want to do.
Exactly.
Right? Like, and that happened to me. Even like the catalyst for me to leave the corporate world was someone that my boyfriend worked with. And he was like, oh, you should meet, my girlfriend, she's a coach. And she told me, oh, I want to be a coach. And I was like, cool. Like, have you done any of the like training? And she's like, no. And I was like, whatever, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
But then she just went and did it. She quit her job, started a coaching business, was getting clients. So she was my inspiration because I'm like, if she can do it, I can do it. And that honestly gave me the confidence to be like, dude, like she was smart, she's capable, but what was different is she just had the balls to do it and I didn't.
Alli Rizacos, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here. Yeah. So when we very first connected on LinkedIn, we started chatting and we very quickly learned that we both are Greek. Yeah. And I am not 100% Greek. I am half Greek. I am also very proud of the other two parts of me. I'm also Irish and Polish. But for some reason, whenever I meet somebody else that's Greek, it's like, oh my God, you're Greek too?
Totally. I'm only half as well, but I feel like it's the other half is Italian. And I feel like there's just so many Italians in the world that it's not that exciting when I meet another Italian. But if I meet another Greek person, I get this way where it's like, oh, like you're Greek and we have this whole bond,
I know. It's so funny to me because I guess in the area that I grew up, there actually is a decent Greek community here. So I feel like I've been surrounded by other Greek people my whole life, but it doesn't change that moment of, oh my God, how fun.
There's just not that many Greeks in the world, like, population wise. So, it is quite a unique thing.
Yeah. Do you have family in Greece?
If I do, it's like very distant family at this point. We went, I went so long ago with my family. I went like, maybe 5 years ago with friends, but I went a long time ago with my family and we went to like the old village. Everyone's from a village. And there was definitely people that recognized my dad. My dad's the Greek one.
Oh, cool.
So there was definitely some relatives, but very distant that I would have been, they speak Greek and I don't even speak Greek. So
same. Yeah. And it's tough too, especially when you look Greek and you're walking around Greece and people just start talking to you in Greek. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Yeah. And they're like, but you look Greek. I'm like, I am Greek.
And you don't speak Greek? And it's Greek.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh gosh. So definitely cool. So, okay. So Greek, Italian woman, where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
I was born in Toronto. Okay. But I didn't necessarily grow up in Toronto. Like I spent the first 10 years of my life there, but then I moved to Paris when I was 10. Okay. Nice. And then lived there for 5 years. And at 15 moved to New York. So I went to like high school in New York and I didn't want to go into hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt to stay in the US and go to university and college in the US. So I came back to Canada for university and saved myself many, many hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt.
I bet.
Which is smart because school in Canada, if you're Canadian, is quite cheap. I think it's like $5,000 a year. So very different than America. Yeah. And so, I knew I was never going to stay in the States, like solely for that reason. Came back to Canada and then have kind of been in Canada ever since while I was in corporate. Then once I quit corporate, I was like, I don't need to be in Canada anymore. Like I don't have a job here. I could literally live anywhere I want, which is then what really sparked the traveling around and building a business while I traveled.
Okay, awesome. So where are you coming from today?
I'm back in Canada. I have a partner and his family he's very close to his family, and his family lives in Canada. My parents actually still live in New York. So like my immediate family is still in the States. So we kind of spread our time between the US and Canada right now. So we usually spend our winters, because I hate the winter. We usually spend our winters somewhere down south, like Florida or Phoenix or something. And then we'll spend the summers up in Canada. But like with with Christmas, we're, recording this in December. So like Christmas is coming, so we're back in Canada with family, all that kind of good stuff. But we'll be heading back down to Phoenix in January.
Oh, awesome.
I'm excited about,
Yeah, well, that's definitely another thing we have in common. The traveling, the warm weather, the Phoenix connection. My parents moved down there about 2 years ago. They still have a house in California. So that's where I currently am right now. And it is unfortunately very cold, and it's been very foggy and rainy and wet. And I'm like, I want to leave. Like I looked at the weather app this morning and it said it was like 80 degrees in Scottsdale. And I was like,
I know. I check it every day. I know. So nice. It's always sunny. And that's the best part.
Yeah, it is. It's lovely. Well, cool. So you definitely have a, interesting background as far as living in some really cool places in the world.
Yeah.
And so how did that play a role in you getting into being an entrepreneur?
Well, I never thought in my whole life that I would ever become an entrepreneur.
Okay.
Because my dad worked at the same company my whole life. So, and my dad was kind of the breadwinner in the family. My mom was more, the homemaker or whatever. She had, a career, but it was whatever. My dad was the breadwinner. And so, growing up subconsciously, I didn't know this consciously at the time, but like subconsciously I was, being conditioned to have a corporate career for the rest of my life. Right? Like, I lived an amazing childhood. Like not everyone can say that they got to live in Paris for 5 years as a kid and then move to New York and go to school. Like that's a pretty unique situation. And that all came from my dad's corporate job. Right.
Okay.
And so
what did he do?
He was in insurance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
And so, subconsciously I've been taking in this conditioning that like corporate gives you the best life. Right. And so, it's the only one I knew. Right.
Right.
Like, no one in my family is an entrepreneur. And so, when I left college, it was like, get a job immediately. Like, that's just corporate, do the thing. So I went into sales, because I studied languages in school, which doesn't get you a job. And so thankfully I had a personality and that's helpful in sales. So, but so I went straight into the corporate world after school. And then, I'm a hyperachiever. So I just kept wanting to climb the ladder and make more money and feel more cool and prove myself and get more validation and all that.
Feel more cool. I love that.
And so
honest.
I mean, let's be honest.
I know it's so true, but it's like so honest. I love that.
And I was climbing the corporate ladder. I got into Salesforce pretty young. I was like 25 when I joined Salesforce. And, that was like when my career took off because that, before that I worked at smaller companies and Salesforce was like a real freaking company and it's an American company and all that kind of stuff. And so when I got there, I just was like, climb the ladder, make more money, be cooler, all that kind of stuff. But all the while, like, always feeling like I had to try to fit in and had to try to I had to pretend to be something that I really didn't feel I was inside. Like I always used to say that like my insides weren't matching my outsides, as much, and especially as a salesperson, because I love sales, but I like the psychology of sales. Like I don't go into sales for the money. Money isn't a huge driver for me. Like that sounds annoying, but whatever. It just is what it is. The way I grew up, blah, blah, blah. But
no, and I think that's such an interesting point because it goes back to, I always relate everything going back to like the love languages. And I think that they're so real in personal lives, but also in professional lives.
Yeah.
And, on my last corporate job, I ran a team of folks, and one of the girls, I remember one day giving her a raise, and she was very happy and she was very grateful, but she told her direct manager after the fact, when her direct manager was like, hey, like, congratulations, I'm so excited for you, I'm glad that we got you here. She was like, I really appreciate it, but the way that I work, like, I would so much rather be told that I'm doing a good job on a more regular basis. And I was just like, wow. I'm like, that is so like, like validation in a different form. And it made me think of the love languages. So when you said that, I was like, oh my God, like, what's your love language? Tell me.
100%. It's words of affirmation. Right? Like, I want to be like, I love validation. Like, I love being told that I'm doing a good job. Like, I love that recognition. And the other thing, so like money is a gift, essentially, right? Like, that's like giving people gifts. I don't really care about gifts, whatever. It doesn't really matter to me. And so I was kind of a weird salesperson because most salespeople are driven by money, and like that's how they motivate you. And I was like, that doesn't really motivate me. And so I was like always pretending that I was motivated by money, but I'm like, I don't really care. To me, what really motivated me was like impact as well, right? Like I wanted to know that I was making an impact. And what I always felt at Salesforce was like, okay, so like I sell a company CRM essentially, and then I have no idea if it worked for them, if it helped their company, because like basically they kind of move on.
You pass it on. Yeah.
And I hated that because like to me, the like ultimate source of validation is like someone being like, Alli, because you sold us this thing, like our lives are different, right? And so thankfully I found coaching, which is like the ultimate career and impact, right? It's like you become someone's coach, you work with them one-on-one, and they literally can say like, because I worked with you specifically on these things, like I got these specific results that I could not have done without you. Right.
Yeah. You're like, this is awesome. Oh my gosh. So I have to wonder though, if because you weren't motivated by money, if that made you a more authentic salesperson, because you were genuinely talking with your customers, like, I do care about this product. I do care how it can impact you, but you weren't there for them to follow up, but you were still like, you were coming from a place of, no, I know this can genuinely help you.
Yeah. I mean, I would hope so, right? It's hard it's obviously hard to get the feedback when you work at a company like Salesforce because you only have these clients for a limited amount of time. You don't keep them for a long time, right? But I mean, I think that's the word that people use to describe me the most, which I think is kind of a funny word because like, what does authenticity really mean? I don't know you. But people feel like I'm very authentic, right? Like people feel that I am very real. And even today I had a sales call and she said, when I came across your profile, like you didn't feel like a robot is what she said. I was like, like that's exactly what I want. Right.
Yeah.
Like, we've all seen these influencers and stuff. I'm like actually convinced that some of them are bots,
No, like they're AI generated and like they just look perfect and say everything perfectly.
Like, this is a bot. Like I've been like so convinced of a couple of them. Right. But it's like, I don't feel connected to them in any way, shape or form. They're just kind of like, okay, here's another viral post. Like, like, that you sourced, by the way, from someone else, that's not your original thought, right? Whereas there's like a handful of people on LinkedIn that I'm like, oh no, this is like a real human. And like, I feel super connected to them. And like, I want to be their friend,
Yeah. And well, I think that's so important. I mean, I feel like we're just in this age of, people want that human connection. It's like almost like, I don't know if ironic is the right word, but it's almost something where it's like, we're in this age where we're more connected than ever and people feel like more alone than ever.
For sure.
And so they're out in the world, in this digital world, like craving connection, craving relatability, craving authenticity, which essentially is just a fancy word for saying being real, right?
Yeah. Being honest, I think it really means, right? Like showing people that you're not perfect, showing people that you fail and that you fuck up, right? It's like, that's what I mean about some of these influencers that are bots. It's like, you can't how can you win every fucking time? Like, how is every fucking post a win? You know?
I know. And it's so not true because it's so not, I mean, that's my favorite thing about having this podcast is, you know, one of my major goals with having these stories and having all of these different types of entrepreneurs come on and tell their stories is the relatability piece. Like, I want somebody listening to think when they're hearing you talk, like, oh my gosh, like I grew up with a mom that was the homemaker. I grew up with a dad that had the same job from the time I can remember till when he retired. And like, but I have this different feeling inside and like, oh my God, I can relate to her. Like she's doing all these different things. Like that's what's so important to me. And that's why I love this digital space where I can talk to people from literally all over the world.
Yeah. From your brother's house. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And what I think is so important is like, in everyone's story, I was just listening to Bob Proctor this morning, who is, you know, one of the like ultimate gurus of personal development. But he was saying that, you know, as a kid, he was kind of like a loser, like dropped out of school, like, you know, just dead end jobs, like not making much of himself. And then he met this guy who, you know, was super successful and taught him to read the book Think and Grow Rich and do this, do all these things. And Bob Proctor died like a billionaire. So it worked. But he was like, but meeting this guy who this guy who was successful, but started off as like a loser too, right? Like not really, you know, didn't finish high school and all that kind of stuff. And he was like, wait, so that means that I don't have to stay a loser my whole life, you know? And he called himself totally. I'm not saying that he was a loser. He actually uses those words. But he was like, whoa, wait, this guy was a loser, but now he's really successful. That means I don't have to stay a loser. I could be successful. And so it's so important. I think what you're doing is so important because we all need those people that are similar to us and be like, wait a second, but they're doing the thing that I want to do.
Exactly.
And, yes. Right? Like, and that happened to me. Even like the catalyst for me to leave the corporate world was someone that my boyfriend worked with at the time. I remember meeting her when she still worked with him. And he was like, oh, you should meet, you know, my girlfriend, she's a coach. And she told me, oh, I want to be a coach. And I was like, cool. Like, have you done any of the like training? And she's like, no. And I was like, oh, whatever, you know, what are you talking about? Yeah. But then she just went and did it. She quit her job, like started a coaching business, was getting clients. And I'm like, still in the corporate world, like still miserable. And I'm like, what the hell? Like,
right.
Who the heck? Like, I was like, who does this chick think she is? And then I'm like, wait a second. Like this. So she was my inspiration because I'm like, if she can do it, I can do it.
Right.
Like,
I love that. I love that.
And that honestly gave me the confidence to be like, dude, like she was smart, she's capable, but what was different is she just had the balls to do it and I didn't. And
I just love that so much. It's so true. It's just like, just go and freaking my favorite, like little, I don't know if it's not a meme because it's just like a little, like a bunch of sentences, but it talks about how like this person didn't start this until they were 46. This person didn't start that until they were 50. Yeah. That is honestly like, I remind myself of that anytime I'm having a moment of doubt because like, it's never too late. And I've always been such a like strong, like, you know, advocate for that. Like, oh, you can do anything. But I was also still like stuck in the corporate world, like trying to figure out my life, like trying to do all these things. And so now I just remind myself of that all the time because I'm like, hey, like, keep going. Like, because who cares? Yeah. It's like Vera Wang was like 46 or something when she started like making dresses or whatever it was. Yeah. I love those. So, okay. So you said the other one is like Warren Buffett made most of his millions like after the age of 80 or something. Like right. That. It's like, okay, that's cool. And I mean, there is something great that comes along with experience. I mean, that is certainly, you know, getting into my 40s was definitely one of those like moments because like I remember being in my 20s and thinking to myself like, oh, well, like once I turn 30, I'm going to feel this way and I'm going to be this way. And now I'm like,
Don't you 30-year-olds as like babies? I'm like, children. You're 30, you're
right? Literally. And it makes me laugh too, especially when they're like, oh my God, I'm so old. I'm turning 30. And I'm like, okay, first of all, like you have so much to learn in this decade. I promise you it's going to be incredible. Yes. And then when you get to 40, it's like the world opens up and it's like, oh, like here we are.
I'm not yet 40, but like, that's obviously my next one. And like, I'm even more excited because like, I feel old, but then I'm like, oh my God, I'm so not old. I have so much more time. And like, you said, the like experience and the age, you know, like if I'm able to be as, you know, this level of success, whatever you want to call it at this point, like, dude, imagine in freaking 10 years, how much more expertise I'm going to have. Like, insane. And I'm only going to be 47 at that point. Like, dude, more companies I can build, you know?
Totally. Like, it's so exciting. One of my mantras for 2024 it has been 1 year from today. And so it's been like my reminder that every little thing, whether how small, or if I have a day where I'm like, oh my God, I didn't get enough done today. But if I stop and look back and go, well, I did that and I did that and I did that. How is that going to benefit me 1 year from today? And so it's like that compound, like each day, you know, adds up to something else. So I look back on to like a year ago today and I'm like, holy shit, I couldn't have imagined where I am now. So now I'm thinking like next year, this time, like, holy shit.
Yeah. I have so many fun stories about that. So, okay, my own. So a year ago today, I had just launched my LinkedIn, not a year ago today, but a year ago this month, like just last year, I just launched my LinkedIn coaching business. And I had no idea if it was going to work, if I was going to make any money, if anyone was going to believe me. I felt like such a fraud and such an imposter. I'm like, you know, now here I am, like, closed a client this morning, closed a client yesterday. It's going great. The whole thing. Right. So like, so weird. But I was just at a mastermind retreat with four other entrepreneurs. And we actually went around the table and we talked about where we were like a year ago or like 5 years ago, whatever it was. But in every single person's story, it was so crazy. In every single person's story, they talked about like where they started, which was like, you know, we were on our like whatever last $500, or like I was delivering for Uber, and I was, you know, like all these kind of like shit situations, right? And a year later, they were like making six figures, job of their dreams, or whatever, like some crazy transformation. And it was always in 1 year that like from like the total shit place to like, I couldn't even imagine this would be possible. And I was like, man, this is so cool, because we're going to be here next year, you know, and something's so different, you know?
No, that is the most exciting thing. And it's all just, you know, believing in yourself and putting yourself out there is, I think, the two things that really it boils down to, especially in this digital world.
People don't want to do.
And that people don't want to do. I mean, they like comfort. I mean, if I look back on my own journey, which I have been because I'm a very reflective person, I was thinking back and then, you know, all of the different, you know, apps or whatever, they bring you like a memory, right? It's like, oh, like 5 years from today, like it was my last day at Intel. And I'm like, 5 years ago today. And I'm like, whoa, like that 5 years went by so fast.
Wow.
But it was like, I remember everything like leading up to finally leaving there. And, you know, I had this, you know, it's always funny, like, what's your tipping point at somewhere? I mean, I had been there for almost 12 years. I had probably thought for about the 18 months prior to putting in my notice that I had wanted to leave. And then it was like one morning in October, I woke up to an email that the email in and of itself was quite benign, you know, nothing too crazy, but it just sent me over the edge. And I was like, you know what? I don't fucking think so. I'm out of here. And I literally went to the office that day. And it was crazy because I almost felt like I was like beginning, like it was like that was the moment that like I started to say goodbye to that chapter of my life. It was like I was sitting in that room and I was like, am I ever going to be in a meeting here again? Like I'm on a mission now. I'm going to find my next step. And so I went and I did that. And then I remember going to the office, you know, to put in notice. And I was just like, whoa, like I'm doing it, you know, it's just wild.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, 5 years ago, what was it 5 years ago? Well, I left Salesforce Jan 2020.
Okay.
So
yeah.
But basically, but I gave them a month notice. So I would have been like telling them basically right around now that I was. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you leave Salesforce and then did you immediately start working for yourself or did you have something interim that you did?
Yep. So I was too scared to start my own coaching business right away because it was, you know, when you work at a company like Intel or Salesforce, I'm sure I can only imagine Intel's the same, which is that, I mean, entrepreneurs don't go to work at Salesforce or Intel. You know,
right.
Like, you go to work there because like you want to like, you know, gain the experience, get the benefits, like you're like corporate soldier through and through. Like that's what you're trying to do, right? You're not trying to be creative. You're just like there to execute, there to make a bunch of money, get the brand on your resume, right? Like it doesn't attract entrepreneurs, right? Entrepreneurs go to startups and whatnot. So, well,
it's so funny you say that because when I was interviewing for the job that I took after I left Intel, it was a I hesitate to say startup because they'd been around for 10 years at that time, but they were still small, like, you know, 200 people. And they had hired me to run a startup within that company. And I remember sitting down with the CEO. It was like my like cherry on the top interview where it was like, they were going to make the decision. It was either going to be me or not. And I knew that once I had gotten in his door that I was like, okay, this is a good sign. Right. Yeah. I remember him being like, you have so much grit. What are you doing at Intel?
Right. Totally.
And I was like, I'm going to take that as a compliment. Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I need to get the hell out of here too. But so
please hire me.
I couldn't conceive of like starting my own company from like the experience at Salesforce, just because like no one left Salesforce to start their own company. Everyone left Salesforce to go to another another big company or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
And I was still obviously quite influenced by my environment at that time, right? And wanting to fit in and all that kind of stuff. And so I took, same as you, I took a job at like a start. They'd been around quite some time, but they were still small, 100 people, whatever. So I took a job at a startup to head up a division of the company, same as you, classic.
Yeah.
And knowing that it like wasn't my dream job, obviously, like it was the thing I needed in order to leave Salesforce, but it wasn't going to be my forever thing. Okay. And I was right. I was only there for like 15 months. But plus the pandemic happened right as I left, like as I was starting that job. But I stayed for 15 months and then I was just like, oh my God, what am I doing? Doing a job I don't want to do, even though I know the job that I do want to do, which is my own coaching business. And I'm just not freaking doing it. And so like, this is so silly, but same thing as like, you know, one seemingly small thing happens and you're just like, something changes in your brain. For me, one night I was just like on YouTube and I found the Jim Carrey commencement speech. So good.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. And he talks about his dad and how he says that his dad was such a funny man. He could have been a comedian, but he was too afraid to like put himself out there and whatnot. And so he became an accountant, which is like the least funny job in the whole world.
Right.
But it was safe, right? He picked a safe job. And so like I, at that time was like being safe. Like, let me go to I like went and worked for my old boss, you know, like it was so safe to do this. And he said, but then he got fired and, you know, we fell onto some tough times. Like we, you know, putting food on the table was hard, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. So he said, I've learned so many lessons from my dad, the most important of which being that you can fail at what you don't even like. So you might as well try at what you love.
Yes.
Right? And that like just entered into my brain, an explosion happened. And I was like, I need to quit my fucking job.
Yeah.
This is so stupid. Cause I was like, I could fail at this job I don't even like.
Right.
And wouldn't that be a greater failure than failing at the thing that I love? Because at least I tried. Like, you can't even say that you failed at something unless you've tried it.
Yeah,
so to even be able to say that I failed at the thing that I love is like means that I even attempted it, right?
Yeah.
So I think like 3 weeks later I quit my job and then started my business.
Nice. No, it's so true. That whole like you never know. And I also think that like goes hand in hand with like you never know how something is going to be until you're actually experiencing it. You know, it's so easy. I mean, and we're all guilty of it. We all say things like, oh, well, if that was me, I would do X, Y, or Z, you know? And then it's like you actually get to being at that point in your life and you're like, holy shit. Like I had no idea that this is how I would react because I had never been in this situation before.
Yeah, totally. And like, you know, when we're making those comments to other people, like you don't have to suffer any of the consequences.
Exactly.
Of what you're telling them to do, right?
Yeah. It's so true. That's that's probably where the whole thing when we were kids and your mom would be like, well, if so-and-so jumped off a bridge, would you do it too? That's probably where that came from. I guarantee I heard that more than once in my childhood from my mom getting upset with me for being stupid. Oh my gosh. Well, this is awesome. Okay. So you started out coaching and you at the beginning, you were working with imposter syndrome, which I think is a really cool spot to start. Yep.
So at first I was like, oh, I guess I'll be like a leadership coach because I had spent the last 5 years in leadership, loves leadership. But then I was like, the hell does that mean? Who's going to hire me? So then I was telling my story. I was doing a lot of networking and stuff like that. And I was telling my story. And so much of my story was the levels of imposter syndrome that I had at every new level. Right. And anytime that I spoke about imposter syndrome, it always resonated. Everyone always was like, oh my God, me too. Right. And this light bulb went on in my head that said, this is a great branding opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. Because if it's
totally,
if that expression resonates so quickly with someone, then I think it's a good brand. And so I just overnight branded myself as the imposter syndrome coach, but I did it specifically for tech sales leaders because I think that especially in sales and especially in tech, we're the biggest imposters because none of us went to school for sales and none of us went to school for tech. We're all just winging it, right? We all just fell into this job, right? And we're all just pretending to love it. Right. I mean, a lot of people love the money. I get that, right? But again, because money wasn't my motivator, I'm like, what are we loving here, right? Of course, I loved lots of it. I love the people and blah, blah, blah. But I'm not getting excited to sell CRM, I don't care, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think they are either, right? But we're all pretending. We're all like, good job, this is the best.
Yeah.
And so I made it very particular to sales leaders and sales leaders in tech because there was, one, it's my background, so it's going to be way more relatable, right? And so it made it so easy for people when they found me to be like, she's going to get it, right? So a lot of my clients had therapists, but therapists don't understand the corporate world. They don't understand sales. They don't understand tech. They don't get it. Right. And so a lot of people hired me because they're like, you're going to get it, but you're also kind of a therapist at the same time. Right.
Well, I think that coaching in general, I mean, I have been working with a life coach for the last 2 years, and I mean, sometimes I'm probably he's probably like, why are you telling me this? Yeah. You know what I
mean? Totally. But all of it's important, right?
It's so important. Yeah.
And so, so I started with imposter syndrome. It went really well because no one else really was branding themselves that way. And I created this niche for myself within the sales tech industry. So I got asked to be on a lot of podcasts. I got asked to do, corporate workshops, all this stuff that I wasn't planning on in any kind of way. I did not become a coach to do any of those things. But I was like, oh, wow, this is really resonating. And so it went really well. And then so many of my clients loved the experience that they had in my coaching. And I worked with all sales leaders. And if you're a leader, you love developing other people. And so a lot of them asked me to then help them start coaching businesses. Right?
Okay.
So then it was one of them asked, 2 of them asked, 5 of them asked, 8 of them asked. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
There's an opportunity
here. There's an opportunity here. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I built this program that I sell now, and I beta tested it with my clients. My first client made $25,000 in the first 3 months. My second client got 8 clients in 8 weeks. I was like, oh shit. I'm not a fluke, right. For me, it's fine, but I don't know if it's going to work for other people. So I was like, okay, this works for other people. So then, I said, last year at this time was when I finally was like, okay, I think I'm going to pivot, which was really scary because everyone knew me as the imposter syndrome coach. I was I wasn't imposter. It was like the imposter.
No, totally. I mean, I think it's so interesting too, because I feel like everybody has felt, I mean, like name someone who has achieved any level of success. Like they have felt like, oh my God, what am I doing here? How did I get myself in this room? Like, how did I get this seat at this table? Yeah. And I mean, if there's anything that I certainly have learned from all of the cool people that I have in my life at different stages of business, different levels of success, is that it's like, no matter how high you go, like we're all still human beings. Like one of the things my dad's always said is like, oh, hey, he puts his pants on one leg at a time, like the rest of us. And it's like, it's so true. You know, we all have those moments where we doubt ourselves but it's not, maybe you just don't talk about it as openly. So seeing someone brand yourself the way you did was probably like this, again, going back to relatability, like, oh my God, okay, someone can to help me talk through all these ways that I'm feeling.
Yeah. And make it okay. Like, you know, because I've been successful and I have imposter syndrome, it's like, oh my God, okay. Like anyone can feel that, like they're not broken, you know, okay, if she can feel it, like, okay, like there's hope for me. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, okay, right. Yeah. Not that I'm like some mega success or anything, but whatever, like there's some level of success that I've achieved.
Yes, definitely. And, don't discount yourself. You've definitely done great things.
Well, it's just like such a weird thing, right? Like even recently I've been talking about like money more and how much money I make. And obviously as women, that's like such a weird thing, right? We're like so socialized to like not talk about money and like just be and what.
And don't you think too, like you and I are kind of in, I mean, I'm about 10 years older than you, but we're still in that era where it wasn't like money wasn't so freely discussed, right? Yeah, like you would go and apply for a job and then they would tell you how much that job was going to pay. It wasn't like on the, you know, the description. And even now it's like, I mean, even, you know, when I got out of college, it was like, you get out of college, you get a job. And then like, that's your income is that job. And now it's like, oh, people are making money from this, that. And it's like, and it's totally okay. Yeah. So all of those things, I think it's helped, you know, bring like the conversations more to the top and be more acceptable. Yeah. But it certainly is still weird. I mean, you know.
Well, it's funny because like, even if you're okay with it, there's going to be people that are going to feel like you're being arrogant or whatever. Right. Which is not a reflection of you. It's obviously a reflection of them. Right.
Absolutely.
And especially if you speak about it online, which is open to the world, like you have to be prepared for people to think certain things about you and that you might not appreciate and whatnot. I think that's the harder part, right? It's like, I'm fine with the money that I make and I don't care about talking about it. It's just the fact of like, okay, but if I put it out into the public world, I have to be ready for how other people's feelings about the amount of the money they make is going to come down, right? So that's like the harder part about it.
Yeah. Well, and it is weird too, because you see, you know, what do they call them? Like keyboard warriors, like people who will comment on things and just be so unbelievably rude. Yeah. And it's mind blowing because we all know, everybody knows that if you were to walk up to a person in public, you would never say that to their face, but behind your phone or behind your computer keyboard, you're just like, well, let me just be the rudest person to walk the planet.
But I always think it's hilarious because like it's a public platform and the only person who you are making look stupid is yourself.
Oh my God. I remember years ago when I was at Intel, we had like, you know, a company intranet, right? I'm sure you guys had that at Salesforce too, where there's like things in there and yes, you can comment on them, but you're commenting as yourself. And I remember one day it was when they were doing the quarterly earnings update and they always went and gave the earnings update to the street first. And then we'd have like a company call that, you know, everybody from around the world could join if they wanted to understand like what we had just presented to the street. I say we, like I wasn't doing any part of that, but what they had just presented to the street, like how our quarter went, like what the outlook was, blah, blah, blah. Well, I remember one day they posted on the intranet that the meeting was going to need to start 30 minutes after the time that it was on the calendar. So they were letting everybody know through all sorts of means that like, hey, it's going to be 30 minutes late. Some guy with his name that you can easily go into the chat. You know, it was like we used not Slack, Skype to chat, right? You could just type his name in and you can see like who's his manager, what organization he is, like all these things. He made some snarky ass comment and it was like, oh, like they probably need the extra time so the execs can walk from the private jet to the conference room. And I just remember being like, dude, like that was not the smartest comment to make. Like everybody can look you up. Like your manager can see that. Like, what are you doing?
Oh, I know this, you know, it's funny because I don't want to really go down this road, but it always seems to be men that make people especially on LinkedIn. Like,
interesting. Okay.
And so it's like, because it's happened to my clients too. Obviously I help my clients create content on it. And anytime they've ever got negative anything, it's always a man.
Amazing.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting, right? Yeah, there's definitely a lot to unpack there.
Coming back to the money thing, though, what's been floating in my mind as we've been talking is like the frustrating part about the money thing is like, again, so like you're going to get some negative comments, whatever, like that's just what it is. But also it seems like unless you talk about how much money you make, people don't actually believe that you're successful.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it's funny too, because I was actually talking with one of my girlfriends yesterday and she's also an entrepreneur and doing her own thing. And we were talking about, she brought up one of her friends and she was just like, I don't think she has any idea like what it is that I'm even doing. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, I can totally relate to that, you know, because like you have some people who are, whether, you know, they're in a corporate world or they're in a different kind of job that is, you know, that's their main focus and their main thing. And they haven't done anything and worked for them. They haven't done anything. They haven't done anything as far as working for themselves is concerned. You know, it is very true where like people are kind of like, wait, like, what do you mean coaching? Or what do you mean this? Like, what do you mean? And you're making money from doing that? Like, I don't understand how. Or so they kind of like almost view it as like a hobby where you're like, no, this is actually pretty lucrative and it's pretty awesome. You know?
Totally. Yeah.
So, okay. So you've done 1 year on the more business side of the coaching world. So let's dive in a little bit more about that. So you're coaching people on how to create thriving coaching businesses.
That's right. Coaching coaches, very meta.
Yeah, I know.
And so my kind of sweet spot is really working with corporate leaders, right? So obviously my background was in leadership and in corporate. And what I've been able to do is understand how to monetize that experience, right? I always tell people, it's like, I'm not some like magician. I don't think I'm just like this, like, I'm not like Alex Hormozy or something, you know, like I'm not just like this business guru in that sense. Maybe in 10 years I will be, but what I know for sure is how to take someone's corporate experience and monetize it on LinkedIn through a coaching business. And the way that I teach people to do that is high ticket coaching, right? Especially if you've been a corporate leader, you know, you have that experience, like you can command higher prices, right? And so most coaches fail because they just charge people by the hour and they give them a bunch, you know, whatever, a block of hours or sessions. And that is completely unscalable and so tiring. And you'll feel so underpaid, even though you're like charging whatever, $250 or $300 an hour, you're still going to feel underpaid because it's just, you need so many clients in order for that to ever surpass your corporate income, of course. Right. So I teach them, my big thing is teaching them how to monetize their experience into a high ticket offer. And you don't need a huge following. So I don't even have a huge following. I think I have 26,000 followers still after 4 years, like kind of embarrassing at this point, but like some people are like, I've been on LinkedIn for 6 months and I have 200,000 followers. And I'm like,
I know that kind of stuff like does blow my mind. I'm like, what is it that, how, what I mean, is going on? I know what they're doing, but, and I refuse to play that game. Like, truly,
they're not special. They're playing a game. It's like, there's a script, there's a textbook, there's a blueprint. If you play it, you will win in that world. Like you will get a lot of followers, but that doesn't mean anything. I always say
exactly.
Like say
it's quality over quality over quantity. I think with everything,
right? And so I never went that route. I never wanted to do like the viral bullshit, you know, carousel cheat sheet crap that no one really cares about, but gets you a lot of followers. But like again, followers don't pay the bills.
No, right? Exactly.
And so my expertise is monetizing a small audience. Like one of my recent clients, she has less than 1,000 followers. And she made $7,000 in 2 weeks of posting.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Right? Like insane.
Yeah,
so
that's amazing.
That's really like my sweet spot. So have some kind of like corporate leadership experience so that there's something to monetize. Like I always say, like, dude, if you've been like a substitute teacher for 10 years, like, I don't know how to monetize that. You know, other than if you're going to help people be substitute teachers.
Right. Sure.
There's like a big demand for, right? But like you have to have something that you've done of like that's noteworthy and like a good story, right? Like client that I just talked to today, like she kept hitting glass ceilings in her sales career. She got promoted. They gave her like the shit territory, the shit team, like, you know, just like the crap to go like where you go and die. And she ended up going to club. Everyone on our team went to club, like hitting 100%. And I'm just like, that's a really fucking cool story. You know what I mean? Like,
totally.
I want to know more. We got to put that into content. That's going to resonate with people, right? But if you don't have that story, no offense, I can't monetize you. You know what I mean? Like,
but I think that's great because like that's, I think one of the best parts about being in coaching is that like, there shouldn't be a coach that's available to everybody. You shouldn't be like, I can help anybody be amazing. You know, you should be like, this is who I can help and be able to have that discernment.
Totally. Because otherwise I had a farmer reach out to me recently that wanted help. And I'm like, I don't think farmers are on LinkedIn.
Oh my gosh.
But if I was just money hungry and I just cared about money, I would have been like, sure, cool.
Sure,
like,
let's do it.
Exactly.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
So that's my big thing. High ticket with a small audience.
Okay. So what do you feel so now that you said you just about hit your year mark of being your sole focus area, what has been the biggest impact that you have felt by what it is that you're doing?
Like in my life or my client's life?
Well, I mean, I think in yours, just because, maybe I answer both because I love hearing success stories, but I also am curious because you talked so much about like that's such a passion of yours and that's like your purpose. And that's one of the things that I love about these stories is really uncovering like, you know, deep down, like what is your purpose? And so for you to feel like you're making an impact, what has been that one this year where you've been like, yes, like that is like, it really hit you where it feels good.
Well, so my purpose and my mission is really to free people from the limitations of their own mind. And, you know, I did that in imposter syndrome coaching and like the results on that side are so amazing. They're less like flashy, of course, you know, people are the result wasn't like they made 50K more or whatever. Like obviously the results are like so internal, but, so that was really fulfilling for different reasons. But this year doing the LinkedIn coaching, I think the biggest thing is that, man, I mean, I wanted to quit so many times. Like I was like, this was a bad idea. I don't know what I'm doing. I need to like immediately shut this down and like save myself from a ton of embarrassment.
So you needed your own coaching. You needed your own imposter syndrome coaching.
I have so much imposter syndrome about it. Because every up leveling, you're going to have a new visit.
Totally.
Imposter syndrome monster, right?
Totally.
Oh yeah. Like so many in the beginning, and like after about like, let's say after about 6 months is when I finally like got over feeling like a fraud. And I was like, okay, like this is real. This is, you know, I can keep moving. But up until, like that 6 month mark, I probably like every month was like, I need to shut this down. I need to stop. So now thinking back to that and like not shutting it down, and I kept going and like, you know, seeing obviously the results of that people are getting, and sometimes like so quickly, right? Like I'm always so shocked when it happens so quickly. Like this one, you know, she has less than 1,000 followers and made back basically the investment in 2 weeks. I'm like, what the hell? Like that's so crazy. And
that's awesome.
But you know, one of the ones I there's a couple that I really love, but one of the ones that comes to mind recently is, so I typically coach people to monetize a skill that they have, like an experience that they have, right? So, you know, like sales coaching or career coaching, like helping people get jobs because there's a more tangible result, right?
Sure.
But one of my clients was just very adamant that he wanted to not do that. And he wanted to help dads and single dads like that are like in kind of the corporate tech world, sales world actually. And I was just like, listen, man, like your passion behind it, like, all right, fine. Like, let's do it. Right. But I was like worried because I'm like, is there a tangible result? You know, like it's a bit more fluffy. And, you know, he just messaged me the other day and he made his first 10K,
nice.
You know, from the coaching. And like, I could just see how much it's resonating and he quit his job. So, and he really, you know, he was going to quit his job in the new year. He quit early. Like his whole life is changed from this experience, right? And I remember when he was making the decision, like there was a lot of back and forth. He was like, like, am I going to invest this money? Like he was, you know, scared and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, thankfully I'm a good salesperson, so he did it. But but now to see where he is, it's like, oh my God, it's just his, you know, he quit the job that he hates. Like he's doing the work that he loves. Like, you know, he met like a new girlfriend and like, you know, because he's single dad, he met like all these different things, right? And it's like 6 months ago, it wasn't, we haven't even been working together for 6 months, but like, 6 months ago, his life looked completely different, you know? So those are always,
I think that's such a testament. You know, one of the things that I've been paying a lot of attention to lately is the different people and the different opportunities that have been flowing into my life. And it's weird because like, if I take a step outside of myself and look at things, I'm like, oh my God, that's so cool. You know, but then I'm also like, I truly believe that it's because I'm just living in alignment with like what I'm really passionate about and what is really driving me. So by putting that energy out into the world, it's naturally bringing in the people that makes sense to be working with me, that makes sense to be, you know, a part of this next phase of my journey.
100%. I mean, that's so much of the work that I do with clients is actually around mindset and energy. So when I went into this LinkedIn business coaching, I was like, okay, I'm going to give them a blueprint, templates, tactics, strategies. Like everything was like very masculine and like, you know, by the book. Right. And I gave that all to them. And then, you know, some of them weren't getting the results that I expected them to get. Right. And I was like, but I have all the tactics and the strength. What's happening?
Yeah.
Like, and they're doing it, but it's not what's happening. Right. So that was a huge wake up call that, like, I always say this now, is that business is as much mindset as it is marketing. Right. Like, you can have the best strategies, the best tactics in the world, but if your mindset is not, you know, aligned or right, whatever word you want to call it, dude, you will create like an invisible force field that just repels people from you. Truly. Like I've seen it. Like the only, like, you know, my client will have like tagline on point, like profile on point, like content on point, and like nothing's happening. And I'm like, okay, so tell me what's going on in here. What is happening inside of you? Because from the outside, this should be working. So like it has to be an internal problem then. And it always is. They're like, oh, they're afraid of success or like what, all these different, you know, limitations. And so that's been such a cool learning this year and obviously that's my background with the imposter syndrome stuff is all mindset, right? So I've been bringing back a lot of the imposter stuff because of course you feel like an imposter when you're building a business.
Oh my gosh.
Like
absolutely.
Major.
Any major change, even like as little as like rebranding this podcast from one name to another name. I was literally like as I'm like posting everything about it, I'm like, what am I doing? you know? And I'm like, I'm doing this because of everybody that's flown, like that's everybody that's been attracted to me and wanted to be on this podcast. Like, that's why I'm doing it. I'm like, so what are you doing? You know, why are you doubting yourself? So it's just funny.
Like, who's noticing?
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing that I remind people of all the time. I'm like, literally nobody fucking cares.
I know. Like when I'm telling you my story of like, I was so afraid, I wanted to shut it down. You're probably like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, you're fine, you know? And like the same thing. Cause when you're telling me you called the podcast a different name in my mind, like, who cares?
Right? I know. It's so true. It's like literally who cares? And I mean, I remember I had this conversation with my brother a couple of years ago. I was like, look, I'm like, at the end of the day, like nobody cares. I was like, even our own parents, Like when they're going to bed at night, I'm sure they're probably like, I'll like hope they're safe, but they're not sitting there stewing on us for hours. And they're like our own parents. I was like, so if you think that like one of your high school friends or your ex-girlfriend or is giving a shit about you, like they're not.
I know.
And if they are, that's a them problem. That means their life is really fucking boring, right?
Like, what's his name? Mark Manson. Like, if you have time to give a fuck about these stupid things, like you need like to go get other things, right?
Literally. I mean, I literally lost a friend like almost 7 years ago because she was literally doing that. She was sitting at home stewing about my life and my choices. And I'm like, I don't know how to help you, kid. This is all on you. Like, I'm so sorry, but like
life. Yeah.
Like focus on yourself. Like, I don't know what to say.
Yeah. Wow.
So, well, yeah. Oh my God. So, okay. So you and I not only got introduced on LinkedIn, but also I think it's because I saw a post that you made about the boot camp that you did. And I just did your boot camp last week. So I feel like that is such an awesome thing to talk about because it does give somebody like a glimpse into how you can help them and benefit them on their journey. So why don't you share a little bit about the boot camp and how you got those rolling? Yeah.
So I was going to mention that too, because that was something new that was, a year of new stuff because so I have my 90-day accelerator. That's my core program that I take corporate leaders through in order to become successful coaches on LinkedIn. But about midway through the year, I was sensing that it was a huge jump for these corporate leaders to just jump into a coaching program around building a business because their biggest when I was like, so what's your biggest challenge, right? When I talked to coaches, they were like, well, I've been writing on LinkedIn and I'm not getting leads. And like, I only, I have one client and this, and they had all these different challenges. Right. Mm-hmm. But when I talked to a corporate leader, I was like, so what's your biggest challenge around, starting a coaching business? They're like, well, how do you do it? And I'm like, no, I get that you don't know, but like, what's the biggest challenge? You're like, I don't know how to do it. And I was just like, well, this is an interesting one. Like, what other questions do I ask here? And so, and it was like, are they really going, they were too like early on in the journey. Like, if you don't even know what you don't even know, are you really going to spend like $8,000, to start it, right? Like, they're like, is this what I need? Like, so I was feeling a lot of like, is this what I need right now? Like, I feel like I'm too early, right? And so I was like, okay, I need to close this gap of like a knowledge gap, right? If I educate them on some of the basics, they will be like, okay, I get it. Like, I need steps. And I also see that like, I actually know more than I think, or like, whatever it is. Right. And so I just came up with this idea, like, out of nowhere, basically, of like, okay, like, what are the 3 things that they need to understand in order to start, basically kickstart your coaching business? And so really, obviously it's niche. Yeah. Who the hell are you going to serve? What problem are you going to solve? And what solution are you going to provide? The second piece is like, how do you get people to know that? So your profile, like you need to have your profile reflect that. And the third piece is your content. Of course, the content being kind of the foundation of how you're going to generate, interest and leads. And so, and there's other pieces, there's offer, there's sales, there's whatnot, but like, what are just like the foundational kind of place to start? If there was 3 steps, that would be the 3 steps that I told people. So I created the bootcamp, 3 days. Day 1's niche, day 2 is the profile, and day 3 is content. And it was really just to give people like a taste of what it takes. Right. And so I did the first one, and the reception was like amazing. I think I got almost like 30 people into the first one, and I converted, I think like 7 of them into my full accelerator. Right. So I was like, oh,
yeah, great odds.
Really worked. Yeah, exactly.
Definitely.
And I was like, maybe I should do this again, right? And so I just continued to do them, and even like everyone's at a different stage of the journey, right? Like, it's such a low ticket, it's $150, right? So it's such a low ticket, so it can kind of attract all different, people at all different stages. And so, some people join the accelerator after, and some of them don't. Just they're in different stages. But even just from the boot camp, some of the results that people have gotten are like, I did not expect them to get. Like, I mean, last week in the one that you were at, people were changing their taglines and immediately getting leads. And I was like, how are people even seeing your tagline?
Yeah. No, that's so cool.
It's been super cool. Like I did not expect it, of course. And it's been obviously an amazing, it's been an amazing learning tool for me because I've gotten to work with so many people in such a short amount of time that I feel like my skill level in those 3 areas has increased by like 10x.
Oh, that's so cool.
Because I've had I give people feedback and I give people feedback on their niche and their profile and all that kind of stuff. So I've had to sharpen my own toolkit in that sense in order to do that in mass, right? Like, last week was 42 people like asking for feedback about their niche, right?
Right.
I've had, I think 50 people go through 50 or so people go through the accelerator. But now I've had 140 people go through the boot camp. Like that just like literally tripled basically people I have gotten to work with. And so it's made me more skilled at what I do too, which I didn't even think about that part of it, Isn't
that always funny when there's like, I call them like unexpected consequences, but like, It's like, you're like, oh, wait, I got to do that. Or, oh, I didn't know that these people were going to feel this way and that I was going to impact them. Even, something you just thought, okay, let's try this out.
I was like, try it out. And I'm like, if no one buys it, oh, well, I'll just like shut it down,
Yeah.
And so, 140 people later, and obviously and because people have gotten such great results too, it's so easy to sell because I just talk about people's results and now people want to, people want to join. But I'm curious, like, obviously you found me and you joined pretty quickly. Yeah. So what compelled you to join?
So I have been on this LinkedIn journey since September, and I did a longer course in September. It was once a week for a month's time. And there was also homework. It was a little more in depth. But again, it was a longer thing. And I learned a ton in there. And I was like, oh, okay. Like this like really makes sense. I started posting more. I feel like now though, I am at a point where my content is very podcast heavy, which I'm totally okay with because I'm incredibly passionate about this podcast and I love it. So when I saw what you were doing, I was like, oh, I liked the niche aspect of it, that you really drilled down into that because I feel like that's where I suffer from my own level of imposter syndrome, in that I'm like, well, wait, I have a cool career path. I've done some really cool things. And a lot of those things were from me just like figuring it out. So I know there's tons of other people that are like in the shoes that I was in, whether it was like 7 years ago, 5 years ago, even 2 years ago. So I was like, okay, maybe if I learn a little bit more about this, then I can feel more confident in getting what's in here out there. Yep. And I do feel that way. And so I'm still like, haven't hit the post button on any of the ideas that I have, but I've been working through some things. So that's the next phase for me, is getting more, because I do coach people kind of just like naturally. Or that's what I've been doing for quite some time, whether it was like somebody that worked directly for me, whether it's like a friend, so I'm kind of like, wait, I'm already doing this. I just need to package it appropriately.
Of course.
And get that out there.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I think what's so fascinating about niching is that it's not, I'm not the first person, obviously, and I'm never going to be the last person to teach people how to niche. And also you can find all that information online for free too. Right?
Yeah.
But it's not about the information. We are the biggest barrier to niching because we don't want to narrow ourselves down, and we feel afraid to be one thing. We want to be all the things. We don't want to limit ourselves and our, potential success and whatnot. And it's literally the exact opposite of all of those things, because we limit our potential success when we become too broad and too general. And,
yes.
But there's so much emotional resistance to it. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Well, and I think so many people too, like, sorry, I feel like I just cut you off. I didn't mean to do that. People totally feel like there's this myth of like oversaturation in so many things. And I remember I saw this one literal kid. He was probably like in his like early 20s or something. And he was I saw him on TikTok like 2 years ago, and he was talking about, I think, copywriting is what he was doing. And he was like, look, he's like, if you can get 5 people to pay you $2,000 a month to do this, he's like, all of a sudden you're making $10,000 a month. And I just remember like thinking about that. I'm like, that is so true. Like this oversaturation myth, it's such a myth. Like there's only one you, there's only one me. You're going to attract people. I'm going to attract people. And there's businesses to be made.
Well, and you just don't need a lot of people.
Yeah.
Especially if you sell high ticket, right? That's why like I'm kind of against the whole virality thing, right? Like it makes you think that you need all of this attention in order to make money. And it's just absolutely not true.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, this has been such an enjoyable conversation. Yeah. I've loved learning all about you and understanding your path to where you are now. And I'm so glad we're connected so we can continue to cheer each other on and have great conversations. So tell people how they can find you.
I'm on LinkedIn. That's like my only place that I hang out. So Alli Rizacos on LinkedIn. Yeah, that's the best place to find me.
Awesome. Well, everybody, as always, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening, watching. And as always, please feel free to subscribe, give a 5-star review if you feel called to. All of that stuff really does matter on these podcast apps. So thank you so much for being here, and we will see you next week.